this takes place in a very fun 80s kind of territory days of pro wrestling. What made you want to explore that? It was really the Wild West there for a while.
Yeah, I think just like what you said, it was the Wild West, and I'm from the prairies in Canada, and there's a certain kind of love for wrestling. I mean, in 2025, there's a love for wrestling everywhere, but I think it's deep in the bones of the prairies, and things like the Hart family and so on. So I think for me, it was just also the heyday of wrestling, and it's like my childhood, so it was the heyday for when I was falling in love with it. So that's why the 80s.
I'd love to hear what made you fall in love with wrestling. Who are some of your favorites growing up?
Growing up, it was for me, Dog was like the one that I connected with. I don't know why. I think you can see a lot of the influence in the misbehave character and in color and weapon of choice, for example. But yeah, I'd say like Ultimate Warrior. When I was very young, Hulk Hogan was like the Superman of the wrestling world. So, he was my gateway drug, I'd say. That was my era of wrestling, and then I kind of fell out of it until I got the idea for this film.
That's really fun. And you also, pro wrestling has a long history of death matches. You get to make actual death matches in this film. How was it like just letting loose and designing these super crazed over the top versions of the death matches that we get to see here?
It was fun, but it was also challenging because um, this isn't my first indie film or indie horror, so I'm kind of at the stage where I can't lie to myself about how hard it's going to be to do some of these things. So I was always trying to write not just what I dreamt would be cool, but stuff that I was like, no one's gonna force me to take this out of the movie, right? And some of them I'm amazed. Like I kept waiting for people to say, we're not gonna do a fire match. You can't afford to do a fire match. We have to cut this. So the fun was in the design of coming up with what would be unique for each of these elements and five matches. And it was actually shockingly easy to come up with a bunch of cool ones. And I had to leave some on the cutting room floor, pun intended, that maybe if there's a sequel I could throw in.
And you mentioned like writing within the scope of the film. That's such a skill, and I thought you did that really well with your other film that released recently, Dial In with Carrie Ann Moss. Um, I wanted to ask you quickly about that film. That was such a
Sure.
fun take on zombies. What was most rewarding about just that experience?
I mean, the most rewarding thing was just bringing it to life. Die Alone is something, a passion project for me. I've been trying really hard to get it made for basically a decade, and it is more subtle and nuanced and quiet. So, when I went to, for example, try and pitch Dark Match, several producers were interested, But with Die Alone, people were like, so it's like a zombie movie, but it's not really a zombie movie, and it's about sad people in the apocalypse. So it was a harder sell for sure, but luckily we got the right people involved. And I mean, obviously the cast is phenomenal. Getting to shoot it in my home of Saskatchewan in summer, all of it, I can't lie, Die Alone was a dream come true project, and I know it's just getting out there still, but I hope it continues to find an audience because I love it. It's very different than anything I've done, and I think I mentioned the cast, but people like Carrie Ann just crushed it. Like Carrie Ann, Douglas Smith, Frank Grillo I think did a great job. Kimberly Sue Murray, and my friends Amy Maticio and Jonathan Cherry who pop up in all my stuff. It's just like it's a love letter to survival.
Yeah, it was such a pleasant surprise last year. I really loved the film, and you mentioned your Canadian upbringing. You also get a Canadian wrestling legend here. Chris Jericho plays the main villain here, the Prophet. How was it just going back and forth with working with him and getting his ideas and working with Chris?
It was great. I was intimidated at first to work with him because, I mean, he is a wrestling superstar. And when you it's like writing anything for anyone. It's like if you wrote a piano movie for a piano virtuoso, you'd be like, oh shit, is he gonna think this is garbage? So I was very afraid that Chris Jericho would read it and be like, what is this garbage? But he actually gave me like a great compliment, which is like, I feel like I could have written this. This is like very accurate to the wrestling experience, especially of the time. So um, I mean, he had notes like any expert would in their field. But it was just great working with him. He's a kind guy. He's a passionate guy. He's a hardworking guy, and he came prepared, you know. So he was a dream collaborator.
And I saw the actor that played the luchador Moadon. He's also a pro wrestler. How is it
Mhm.
using that mixture of traditional actors and wrestlers, especially when it came into the fight choreography? I assume that that helped a lot having those guys with those backgrounds.
It really did. I mean, it was interesting because it's just like you said, we had to really go character by character and say almost mathematically, are you a fighter or an actor? Ayisha Issa, who plays Misbehave, was the one unfortunate character where I was like, I can't get a fighter or an actor. I need someone who can do both. So we had to look really hard to find that rare actor who has stunt background and training and you know she has a jiu-jitsu background and everything like that. But with the rest of the cast, we really had to kind of mathematically say where does your strength need to lie and just hope and pray that you're also, you know, you're a great actor who maybe can throw a punch, or you're a great wrestler who can deliver a handful of dialogue and have it seem natural. And you know, the other thing is wrestlers are good actors. You know, I didn't know this 10 years ago necessarily. I might have been snobbish about that, but now I'm very open to wrestlers because you look for the personas they're playing in the ring. They can deliver that in a film, you know. They might even be more practiced than many actors because they're doing it every night in different cities under weird circumstances. So um, yeah, Mo was great. Justin Lawrick was great. We had so many people who I think really over delivered, and this was not an easy film. They had to punish themselves physically. You know, things like doing the earth match when Mo and Mitch were doing the earth match. They're really fighting on a giant pile of dirt. They're body slamming. They're throwing themselves off the ropes. In a wrestling match in an evening, they do it once. You know, we do multiple takes in a film. So these guys were doing the most punishing stuff for a whole day.
Yeah, and you can tell that in the film. There's some really great performances, and you brought up Ayisha Issa. I did want to ask about her. You know, she obviously has the martial arts background. She's always in great shape. Um, how is it just seeing her? Because as you mentioned, she is that dual threat where she can deliver on both sides. And I've seen her in some smaller roles, but it was so refreshing to see her as a lead here. So how is it just really getting to give her something really juicy she could use throughout this film?
I mean, I thought it was great. I had a great experience working with her. You'd have to ask her. I don't know what she thought going in or what she expected it would be, but I feel like we had a really nice collaboration. I feel like I genuinely wanted her to bring a lot to the character and you know call bullshit on me if there was things she didn't like about the character or that felt inauthentic. But you know, like with every actor I work with, I try and say, especially the scripts I've written, I've put a lot of thought into this. I really care a lot about your journey and the nuances of who you are. But now I'm handing the character to you, and I want you to kick the tires. You know, like if there's things that you think are inauthentic or ideas you have, let's discuss them. And Aisha was definitely very passionate about, um, you know, elevating the film, not just like doing quote what I say as a director, but saying, why is this happening? How is that happening? And her questioning often led to some pretty cool outcomes.
And I love the look of the film. I wanted to ask you about collaborating with cinematographer Kareem Hussein. He did great work on Infinity Pool and some other films. How is it really developing the look for this film?
I mean, it was intense. Kareem Hussein is, I would say, a genius. He's a visual genius. He is not someone who rests on his laurels or his talent. he always wants to try something different and better and experiment. And for that reason, I genuinely think he elevated this film. There's a version of this film that just kind of looks like expected or stock or hokey. And he approached this like a true artist. And there's motifs behind things, and no shot is done by accident. And most importantly for me, like we just share I think, a similar energy and a vibe. So I'm someone who likes to over prepare, and not everyone does in film. So it was like meeting your match in a way of finding someone who was kind of as crazy and as obsessive as you were, and who you could like really push yourself to make this the best version of what it is. And this was not an easy film. I've done films that I've never done an easy film actually, but this was 22 days, and every day was something insane we were taking on. So it wasn't just like, oh, what's a cool shot for two people talking? It's like, what's a cool shot that has meaning and purpose and color and originality, and also we have to do 1,000 in the day because we're doing a fight scene.
And my last question for you, you get to create this whole stable of wrestlers, and I feel like that's a childhood dream of just coming up with a bunch of wrestling
It
personas.
was.
How was that process like? Were there a lot of revisions? How was that?
I'm gonna say honestly, no, there wasn't a lot of revisions. I kind of I had thought about this script so long that I had versions of characters in my head, and then it was just like boom. I knew little things. Like I knew I wanted the heroes of this film to be the heels. Like I didn't want to do the baby faces. I just kept looking for what are the stock fun characters. I wanted a luchador, obviously. I wanted a character who, because I had done prior to this film, I was researching amateur wrestling, like smaller wrestling companies, and how they would set out to do things. So I actually had the benefit of interviewing about a dozen real wrestlers in Saskatchewan, and one of the characters, uh, and I say characters, he was a person, but he would never tell me his name, and he would never remove his mask. And I was doing a real documentary on their lives, and some of the wrestlers were like, "Come visit me at work, watch me with my wife and kids." And this one guy was like, "You will never know anything about me. I will tell you about my life in the ring, and you will never know anything." And I just love that so much. I'm like, I want a character who is a full mystery, but he's got heart, right? And yeah, Joe was a certain kind of thing, and he grew working with Stephen Ogg. He got better than what's on the page. Obviously, same, like I said, with Miss and Misbehave and Ayisha Issa. And the others was just like you said, building that fun, perfect roster of like, I need a guy who is very ego driven. So many wrestlers are like, I'm the best in the world, and everyone freaks out. I wanted some creepy looking characters, and I wanted someone who was a nice foil to Misbehave. So Kate the Great is basically, while everyone's kind of spitting and throwing stuff at Miss, I wanted the character who walks in the ring and it's basically like she's Supergirl or something. Everyone's like they're bowing down and be like, "You're our queen." So it was just like you said, it was imagination and play and just like coming up with that fun, almost like perfect roster, like a kid with action figures, right?